So the 15th Amendment is necessary. The 15th Amendment, by giving blacks the right to vote, by the same token, gave blacks the opportunity to participate in a decision-making process that will impact upon the quality of their lives. And in this kind of environment within which we live, the only way that people can have some power of self-determination, which is the true definition of freedom, is the right to be able to determine who your elected representatives are going to be. So if black folks can realize that when they fail to vote, they have given up their power of self-determination, maybe that will encourage them, be it rain, sleet, or snow, to go out there and vote, because that's the only opportunity that the Constitution gives us to truly be free.
Mr. Dawson, from your training, speak to that issue, blacks in the Constitution.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the very first thing that Attorney Blackshear said, and that is that when you speak of black folks in the U.S. Constitution, the first thing that I think of is the fact that the Constitution says we're 3/5 of a person, and not until the adoption of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, as Mr. Blackshear said, was there any kind of even halfway attempt to then confer on these persons who were heretofore deemed as 3/5 human to then say they're citizens. But then I like to even add on to what Mr. Blackshear said, and that is, even though these amendments may have purportedly given black people citizenship, it was not until some 100 years later, with the enactment of all the civil rights legislation in the 1960s, the Public Accommodations Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Housing Bill in 1968. Not really until then were black people really brought into this quote-unquote mainstream of American society. And there are some who would still argue, and I would say probably with some merit, that even still in 1995, there is still that struggle, really on the part of probably most black folks, to still try to achieve this elusive thing called first-class citizenship. I mean, when you consider that you're existing in a country whose very legal, the document which formed this country, the Constitution, is premised on the fact that you're 3/5 of a person, it's going to be hard to overcome that notion just by the adoption or enactment of laws. And maybe Mr. Blackshear may feel differently about it.
No, I don't. I mean, I concur. It still goes back to those 2 points that every human being unconsciously or consciously aspires. He or she wants to be free, and sometimes we confuse that with equality. We look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the employment discrimination laws, the laws prohibiting racial discrimination in public accommodations, the Housing Act, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and the Voters' Rights Act of 1965, and things of this type. Except the Voters' Rights Act of 1965, the civil rights laws basically are designed to make black people equal, to be treated equally, to not be discriminated against because of race. But we need to understand, slaves were equal. There was no discrimination among slaves, but neither one of them were free. So you need something in addition to civil rights laws of 1964 that simply make you equal. You need laws like the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 that gives you the power to take, the power of self-determination, which is the true definition of freedom. You notice until the enactment of the Voters' Rights Act of 1965, which is the enabling statute of the 15th Amendment, you had black majority counties still not having any representatives in city government in places in Mississippi and Alabama. Now, when the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 came about, where black people now could vote, now had some opportunity to participate in the decision-making process, you now saw that they were being represented for the first time by members of their own race. The mayors of traditionally southern cities like Birmingham all of a sudden become a reality. Mayors, my lord, in Atlanta, Georgia, all of a sudden becoming a reality. Mayors in cities like Cleveland, which was the first black mayor, Stokes, became a reality. Only because finally the 15th Amendment, which was designed to give us the right of power determination, was being enabled, was being implemented by the Voters' Rights Act of 1965. So we need to think very carefully about the distinctions between equality and freedom.
Very good. Dawson.
Well, I agree, and it was interesting when I was listening to Attorney Blackshear talk about the positive results of the enactment of the Voting Rights Act, which was an enabling statute for the 15th Amendment. Even still in 1994 and 1995, where we are right now, there are many places in the South, specifically that I've read about and that you hear about, where there's still all kinds of maneuvers and roadblocks which would allow people to vote still. I think, for example, in some counties in Mississippi, and I can't cite the specific counties, but you have to, persons residing in the county have to commute to the county seat downtown on one day, maybe a week, to vote, and to register to vote, and that presents a hardship for people. There have been some people who have tried to register folks to vote in some of these rural counties who've been hit with all kind of federal charges of voting irregularities because they simply were trying to accommodate people and able to, so they can pursue their constitutional rights. So just because we have statutes approved, adopted, and we have amendments to the Constitution does not necessarily mean that, we still have equality. I think it's an ongoing struggle. It's something people are going to have to continuously pursue. And quite frankly, those where voting does not present a problem, where people can willingly and freely go vote, the trend appears to be right now, and I think is something that that we as black folks can have a look at, that among younger black folks, the trend seems to be not to participate in the electoral process. I don't know what that